Welcome to our session on SAP EWM Technical. We are going to discuss about transactional handling in SAP EWM, and we will delve into the intricate aspect of transaction management within SAP EWM. We will be focusing on the principle of transactional handling, why it is so important, what are the components that we need to keep in mind. And once we discuss about the various component of transaction manager or how transaction should be handled, we will also see some of the best practices to ensure data consistency and integrity in SAP EWM. Okay. So coming back to this topic, the technical architecture and how transaction should be handled in SAP EWM. Now, the architecture of an SAP EWM system is characterized by various components or various type of objects that we are going to deal with. And some of the objects is listed down in the slide. And while explaining the example or while showing the demo in the system, we will concentrate more on these components or the objects related to these components. And we will see what are the function modules, what are the query classes, or what are the components that is available in the system using which we should be handling the transaction that ensures data consistency and data integrity. So before understanding the steps in transaction handling, let us try to understand what is data consistency and what is data integrity in SAP EWM. I'm pretty sure you are already knowing about these concepts, but from EWM perspective, it becomes even more important. Being an expert in your own area, being an expert developers, you're already familiar or you're already ensuring that data is consistent across your system. But let us see the common pitfalls or the common errors that we make, or what are the key principles that we need to ensure so that our data is consistent across all the systems. When I say all the systems, I even mean the different components. So let's say the ERP delivery is getting created, the delivery is getting distributed, that is related to the delivery processing. Then once the delivery is processed, you will have internal warehouse movement. So warehouse logistics component will come into picture. Then even the inventory related data. So your stock should be updated. All the notifications, the flags and everything should be updated. That would be coming probably in the quality management component and inventory management component and so on and so forth. So all the related, all the components which is integrated into SAP EWM system, you should ensure that your data, whatever you are updating, is getting updated in all these components. All the flags are getting updated. All the status changes is happening properly. So when I talk about data consistency, So when I talk about data consistency refers to ensuring that all data that is related to your EWM processes remains accurate, reliable, and sync across various system components. So let us take a very simple example. We have seen that when we created our inbound delivery in ERP, the delivery got distributed to EWM. And then we logged into SAP EWM and using the transaction SCWM PRDI, we performed the goods receipt. And the goods receipt notification was sent from EWM to ERP system. Let's say for some reason, because of some inconsistency, the goods receipt in the EWM system is done correctly, but the status change message to ERP was not sent, or the component which should have triggered the status change was not triggered correctly. That will render our system inconsistent. And then if you are performing any further activity on the ERP side, or maybe even on the EWM side, you might get some error because the data is inconsistent. Similarly, when you are performing any activity, let's say related to packing, or let's say anything, packing, unpacking, whatever warehouse task creation, if all the data, all the components are not updated, let's say the stock is not updated, so there could be all these components are getting executed in one logical unit of work, or it could get executed in multiple LUVs. So if any of the components is not updated correctly, that will leave your system inconsistent. And why it is very crucial to maintain data consistency, we have already seen, to avoid errors, because inconsistent data can lead to errors in order processing. The stock or the inventory, there could be discrepancies. Maybe if someone is running a report, then they could see incorrect data in the reporting tools. Then there could be operational inefficiency if your data is inconsistent. Why there could be operational inefficiency? So if your data is not consistent, your warehouse operations will not be streamlined. You might you might project incorrect information that could lead to a wrong decision making, that could lead to probably a wrong process in the EWM system. So these are some of the implications we could have if our data is not consistent across the EWM system. And I am referring to the example or from EWM perspective, but any module that you have been working in SAP, you had to ensure data consistency. Okay, so now let me talk a little bit more about this, and then I will probably log into the system. Okay, so the first and foremost thing in SAP EWM is there are different objects already provided by SAP, maybe a query class, a handler class, or maybe some function module, which you must utilize to ensure that, okay, you are following the correct architecture, you are ensuring the correct transaction handling in SAP EWM system. And we will see both a standard solution, how SAP is utilizing those components in their standard processing, and we will try to create a very simple example using those components, using those class methods and function modules, and we will see how transaction handling we can achieve in our custom developments as well. Let me open this class. Okay, so if you open this class SCWM/CL_TM, and if you go to the properties of it, you can see the transaction manager for logical unit of work in warehouse management. So this is the class which is in a way being utilized to ensure all the data consistency, all the data integrity is being taken care of. Various methods, there are various methods in this class which will be called inside your programs, maybe in your function modules, you will see various components of this being. Let me see one of the components. I'm not sure if it will show in the where use list. Okay, let me see this. Okay, maybe it is not directly called. That is the reason it is not showing up in many places. But this function, this method, set LG_num. So this will be setting up your warehouse number for the execution, for the transaction that you are executing. What is the warehouse number that will get determined, and it is not to be changed. So any custom code you are writing or any processing that you are doing, you should never alter the warehouse number. So once you're using this method, you can set the warehouse, and that warehouse number will be used across all the components of that LUB. Before going into the debugger, let us discuss what are the key principles or what are the key components in this transaction manager or the architecture of this technical architecture of transaction handling in SAP EWM. First is transactional handling, and this information is there in different slides. So as I mentioned, in technical architecture, it is grouped or it is categorized by different components and different objects. And the list of those components and different objects you can see over here. So one is delivery processing. You have warehouse logistics, inventory management, and so on and so forth. So if I go back to the individual component slide, so there are more slides on this. So for example, if I go to the warehouse logistics, you can see the components, you can see the specific components, and then if I go into the further slides, you will see the package, what are the class and methods, what are the function modules which should be used if you are doing any activity related to delivery processing. So if I go here, you can see the overall architecture, how SAP is doing, which class is getting called from where, and you can see a whole mesh of class which is getting called. We don't need to remember, we don't need to know about each and every class, but in general, you should know the basic classes, and that we will again be covering when we are discussing about all the important function modules, all the important methods, Fiori application. We will again be covering. There we will see a list according to the components. Then you see the various class and methods, a little bit explanation about those, the important tables that is related to this particular component. Yep. So I would be going by slide. I would be showing most of the things in the system. I would put a debugger and we'll see how these components are getting called. Maybe a few components we need to know, and how do I find those components, that also I'll show you. Instead of remembering the component names or the table name, the function module name, we are going to see that in the debugger. Okay, so talking about the data consistency again, I'm coming back to that topic again and again, because that is what we are going to ensure in this transaction manager. So the first component of any transaction is transactional integrity. So each and every transaction, not only in EWM, but even if you are executing any transaction, for example, if you are creating a sales order, it would be considered as a logical unit of work, what we call it as LUV in short. And it must either be completed entirely or it must not be executed. For example, if I am creating a sales order, I went to the transaction VA01, I have entered all the data, I am creating a sales order. Let us assume the steps that are there to create a sales order. First, it will create a sales order in my, I'm giving this just an assumption. This is an hypothetical example that I am giving. So the steps could be is that in sales order creation, the sales order should get created. It should trigger a request probably to my warehouse that, okay, the sales order is created. We need to ensure that, okay, this is the product that we need to deliver to this customer on so and so date. And then maybe the EWM system or my production facility, they will give us a response that, okay, this is the date, what you are committing to the customer, that is fine. Once that step is achieved, then the sales order will be marked as complete. It will trigger an IDOC or maybe any kind of interface to the customer that, okay, this is the sales order information, what you have created, their address, their delivery date, the price and everything is there. Let us assume now, out of these three subcomponents we talked about, first is creating the sales order, then getting the factory confirmation date or the delivery date. These two steps were executed successfully. And the third step, which is sending the status back to the customer that, okay, this is the sales order number, this is a delivery date. Somehow that step was not executed. And do you think it is going to serve our purpose? Because the customer is not informed about the delivery or about the order which he had placed. And that is data inconsistency. Since the customer, and you can assume even in real-time scenario, if you're placing an order with Amazon, you are going to your order book, or maybe you did not get any notification on your WhatsApp or through SMS, you had placed an order. Although from Amazon side that order is placed, but you cannot see that order. You did not have any information about that order. Do you think you will be ready to accept that order? Maybe when that order is attempted for delivery, you are not at your home or you're not at your delivery location. So these are the consequences that if inconsistent data could lead to. And when we talk about transactional integrity or entire LUV should get executed in complete, the very classic example of that is your ATM transaction. So let's say what you do, you carry your ATM card, you go to an ATM machine, you insert your card, you enter certain data. Certain data, maybe you will enter your PIN number to confirm or to authenticate yourself as an account holder. Then the ATM machine will fetch certain information, maybe your account balance or bank information, whatever information they are fetching in the background. And then you withdraw 10,000 rupees. Your withdrawal happened. You are able to withdraw the cash. You took out the cash from your machine, but the balance was not updated in your account. You would be a very happy person. You already got 10,000 cash, but that amount has not got deducted from your account because of transactional inconsistency. So one of the key principle of data consistency that your LUV should get executed completely. If there are certain failures, it should be rolled back, or commit should happen only when the entire LUV is complete. So that is one of the components of data consistency, and that we will see. So if you will see, there are various there are various commit and rollback methods. So if you are using any custom development, if you are developing, then you should take care of this. And implicitly, SAP is also taking care of commit and rollback. This will not be called explicitly, but again, there are various other classes for each and every component, and we will see there also they have a commit and rollback, and which will ensure transactional consistency. The second very important concept to ensure data consistency is locking. We have discussed about RF. So if I go to RF screen, okay, here I am entering a delivery number. Or let's say 8. Yeah. So this is the delivery which I am trying to process. I am trying to do the goods receipt for this delivery. Now, another user on the same warehouse, by mistake or somehow, he also logged into his or her RF machine and enters the same delivery number 4448. And if he or she is trying to do a goods receipt, should that be allowed? I am still using a same user. I'm not sure, but let me try. It will not give me an error here, but if I try to process maybe in another session, it will give me an error that, okay, it is locked. Here it will not give me an error because the locking would be happening at the maybe at the table, not at the delivery number level. But again, what I mean to say is, like, let's say two users, they both are trying to process the same delivery number. One of the users should be able to process it completely. Other will get an error that, okay, this delivery number is locked. And that is what we mean by locking mechanism. And what locking mechanism will do, it will prevent concurrent modification of data, the same data, not the data, concurrent modification of the same data. And it could be handling unit, it could be your delivery number, it could be your warehouse task, anything. So any component, if multiple users are trying to access or modifying the data concurrently or simultaneously, it should prevent that. And again, in the transaction manager, you have various lock mechanism, and also we have different levels at which locking could be done. So you are already familiar about this concept, coming from the technical background, that, okay, you are maybe locking one particular entry, or maybe you are locking the entire table. Similarly, in EWM also, when you are performing locking, you need to see that how SAP is doing the locking, whether they are doing, for example, if you are processing a delivery. In that particular delivery, there could be 10 line items. Depending upon what process you are executing, you will either lock the entire delivery, or you will execute the lock at the line item level. Instead of locking the delivery, you will execute the lock at the line item level. And again, it depends on the process that you are executing. So when you are developing something custom, it is important that, okay, you go back to the standard and see that for that particular process, what is the level of locking which SAP is implementing. For example, if you have written a custom report where you are changing the status of a delivery, and if locking is required at the entire delivery level, then only perform the lock at the delivery level. Otherwise, let's say if you are calling a class method which is changing the status of each line item one by one. So maybe in a loop, you are changing the status of line item one by one. Then it doesn't make sense that I lock the entire delivery. No, I would be performing the lock at the line item level. I'll execute, I'll release the lock, and then move on to the next item. So that is the concept of locking. Then the third concept is update function.
Hey, you know, ZaranTech now offers SAP corporate training. That's right. Train your workforce in SAP with our comprehensive program. We offer customized courses, certified trainers, and hands-on labs for both individuals and businesses. Our standout features? Bespoke training, fully configured servers for practice, in-house materials, and a dedicated LMS. Plus, get session recordings and 24/7 support. From functional to technical modules, we have got it all. Choose ZaranTech for SAP training and watch your team excel. Learn, upskill, succeed with ZaranTech.
What do I mean by update function? Again, you are familiar with this concept. This is nothing new that we are going to discuss. And it is again related to same data consistency. What update function will do? That if you want to update the database tables, and if there are multiple tables that needs to be updated as part of one LUV, if you are using an update function, then you can ensure that UV is either completely executed or rollback. So you will maybe trigger an update function module, and all your update activities will be performed in that particular update function. Then error handling and rollback, we have already discussed that, okay, if the transaction is not successful, if there are certain errors, then it should not be committed. It should be rolled back. And whatever error message, maybe in form of an UI error message, or maybe error message in form of an application log should be written, so that user is notified about the status or the component which triggered the error. Now, one very important and probably relatively a new, not new, we should be doing that in other modules as well, but we do not perform this too much in the other modules, is the cleanup of the buffers, or maybe cleanup of all the cache and everything. So when you execute your transaction, maybe your transaction is executed successfully, maybe committed or rollback, whatever. So I am considering that as complete transaction. Then still there could be data which is lying in your buffers. A lot of data which was pulled from your database was put into your buffers, and that might be lying in your buffers. That requires to be cleaned up. Otherwise, probably there would be unnecessary data that would be lying in your buffers. Unnecessary, like, I mean, it will consume your memory. Maybe in later transactions, it could result in inaccurate data processing, because if you're reading the data from your buffer, you might read inaccurate data, and that could have unnecessary consequences. So again, the cleanup of buffers is also important. And if you go back to this class, you should see a cleanup method, delete transactional data buffer. So any transactional data which is in the buffers is not required will be cleaned up. So again, even before, at the start of the transaction, there are cleanup process which is running. So it is ensuring that there is no irrelevant data in the buffers. And then after executing the transaction also, it is ensuring that the data is cleaned up from the buffers. Okay, so any question on the components? I know all these components, it's just a repeat. You have been doing this in different capacity, in different versions in your programming. But in EWM, it is even more important. It's because of the sheer number or the volume of data that you will be executing. So it even becomes more important that your transaction is handled nicely, I would say, so that it is not giving any inaccurate data, it is not giving unnecessary errors, it is not in state. Okay, any questions on the concept that we have discussed so far? I'll be showing you in the system, but on the high level concept, any questions on that? Or anything which is new, you have not heard of that particular component of transaction handling. This is the first time you're hearing that. Okay, then let us get a little bit into the system. Let's see how it is getting triggered. And we will also see the different function modules. So I'll come to this also. Okay, so if you will look at this slide related to delivery management, Now, to select delivery documents or warehouse request without having to use the individual aspect directly, SAP provides the method. So again, if you remember, I did mention about that, okay, you should never write a direct select query on any of the EWM tables. SAP by default is providing either a query method or maybe a function module which you are going to utilize. And what is the advantage of using those components, the query method or function module? It will ensure data consistency. If you are, let's say, reading a data, and if you are let's say making changes to that particular table, updating or changing something, you might miss out on some of the components that we discussed, like cleaning the buffers, locking. You might miss out. But if you are making use of this components, these query methods or these function modules, then the entire transaction consistency will be maintained. Internally also, SAP will be taking care of the locking, the releasing the lock, clearing the buffers. All those things will be taken care of. So every component, whether it is related to delivery, whether it is related to inventory management, warehouse processing, you will find different classes, you will find different function modules everywhere. We will see, at least for handling unit, warehouse task, inbound delivery. Let's see, we'll try to debug some of the things and we will see these components. So let me first open this class. Again, this is not the only class. There could be multiple classes. You can see based on the document category, there are different types of classes which are getting called. So even in delivery management, there are multiple classes which are getting called based on the document category. So I'll just try to open one. Okay. So most of the components that we discussed, unlock. Let's see this method, what it is doing. And I'm not sure which method will be called. There could be multiple unlocks. Again, some could be private, some could be public, and depending upon where you are executing, these methods could be called. And most probably with the name, there is no documentation available, but looks like it is going to maybe unlock the data or release the logs from the database. There should be a cleanup method as well. Yep, you can see the delete buffer data of the respective instance, or maybe delete all buffer data, depending upon the type or from where it is getting called. It will call the corresponding cleanup methods. Yeah, there are even lock methods which will be locking the data before you are performing any kind of update, any kind of change, and these are private to this class. So again, might be called from some other methods. What we are intended to look into this is the query method. So that will be the method which you will be calling from outside, to read the data. So where is that query method? Is it the query mapping key? No, this is a private method. Okay, I'm sorry. This is the delivery management class. And again, based on the different document category, it could have different implementation. So we need to go to this PRD delivery class. And if I see the mass access of delivery PRD objects. Okay, so there is nothing much in the description, but we need to go to this. Let's see in this method. Yeah. So instead of seeing in this hierarchical view, I'll open one more session. SC24. Now here you see it is implementing this method query, and this is a public method. So you can access this data outside of this class, and which let's get into this method. And there is a class documentation, method documentation also, so we can see that. So you can see the parameters, the document ID, again, because based on different document ID, the different classes are called that we have seen. There are 3 different classes. So based on the document ID, whether it will be validated, whether this is the class which should be called or not. Then, of course, the document ID and document number, then your warehouse number, which is important. So if it will be set somewhere before executing the LUV, your warehouse will be set for that particular LUV, and that should not be changed. Never, ever in any custom development or any standard BAD implementation or anything, you should never change the warehouse number explicitly. Then it will read the data and it will return all your delivery related information. So HU, HU header, HU item, everything, document item related data, everything will be returned into this from this particular query method. Let us go a little bit into the code. I'll quickly scan, will not go into each and every details, but we'll just see what are the components which are being called over here. So let me search if I'm able to find directly. So one is set. No, so all those are not called directly in this method. Maybe the other method of the same class will be called to execute those data. Towards the end. Yeah, there is no commit, rollback, anything in this, but we see that those methods are there in this class. So maybe it would be called in sequence, like the cleanup is there. This is a query method, so I don't think we need rollback or commit. So that probably would not be required, but yeah, data cleanup is there. You also have the save methods. So anything that is related to saving, you need to call this method. So save delivery changes you use before save. So this is the method which will be called. And here, this will take care of maybe all the necessarily data consistency. It will be taken care by this method. Let me put, not here, let me run the transaction and then see what all is getting called in what sequence. So I'll put a breakpoint in these three methods: cleanup, save, and query. Or maybe before that, let me reach a certain step. So I'm just preparing some of the data. What happened to this? Okay, so I'll just make a note of the delivery numbers. I'll create 2-3 inbound deliveries, and so that we can debug those. So one delivery is 89. I'll create one more. One delivery is 90. Let me create a couple more. 89, 90, 91. One last one. Okay, 92. Let me copy this. Okay, fine. So it was 89, 90, 91. Okay, now I will go to PRDI transaction. Now I will select the node and I'll give the delivery number. Before that, let me trigger my debugger. So I will just give the delivery number. Now, if you want to analyze all the EWM related stuff, we will see how we can do that, because I don't want to put a breakpoint in the classes which I know. First, we will try to list down the classes or methods, functions which are getting called, and then we will see that whatever we have discussed, anything related to those are getting called or not. So I will start the debugger explicitly here, and then I will click on perform search. Okay, then I'll do a couple of things. I'll check my update debugging is enabled. My update debugging is enabled. Perfect. Now I will enable this layer debugger. I'll enable this layer aware debugger. And I know that most of the EWM related components start with this naming convention, SCW. I'll put this. For delivery, there is one more, SCDL. Let me see. It is still SCWM, but okay, fine. Let's check with this. Okay, now I have enabled this checkbox that, okay, whenever we are encountering any object like this with name SCWM star, at the entry, it should stop. So let's enable this, and I can see it is enabled because I am getting this option to deactivate layer aware debugging. So it is enabled. I'll do an F8. I simply do an F8. Okay, so queue message is fine. I don't want to know about this. Okay, so the first method which is getting called is your cleanup method. Although it is we discussed about the TM, but again, the individual components have their own classes. And from the classes, you can see the cleanup method, which is being. So if I open this class also, so properties, service provided delivery. So again, it is also a delivery related class. You can see the package HCWM delivery. Then in the methods, this also has the cleanup, save, everything. So this is the first method. Again, the transaction handling should be happening. Again, there could be multiple classes for that. So this is the method. The cleanup method of this class is getting called. Let me make a note of this also. Okay, that is the first method got called. Now I will not be going into this. but you can see the whatever cleanup activities it is going to do for that particular warehouse number, document category, it will perform the cleanup over here. So, and here you can see it is calling the transaction manager cleanup. So I hope it will get called. It is getting called. So from your component class, your transaction manager cleanup will be called. So this also should be noted, and you will pass the reason and warehouse number, and this could be something that could be changing. Okay, then I'll go to the next object set. So it is still doing the cleanup for different components, because again, when you are running delivery, you are getting all set of data, maybe delivery item, HU, all those information is there. So different cleanups. Okay. Now that again in the CL transaction manager class, you can see the method set LG num init, which is being called. So from here, maybe again the set LG num will be called, which will set your warehouse number for execution. So that should not be changed, although we are passing, but it will register that warehouse number, that okay, this particular LUV which we are executing is for that particular warehouse number. So let me make a note of this. So I'll do the next set of object. Now from the CLSP class itself, it is executing your query execute. This will again probably execute all your methods in the sequence. We'll make a note of this also, but let's see. Okay, these we are not going to discuss. The various read operations, and you can see there are function modules which are being called to read the data. Whatever data they are reading, even I'm not sure what is this 300 MD table, but it will read those data. Okay, so the wrapper delivery wrapper class constructor is called this, not this one. Okay, so most of the components in EWM is also based on a BOPF framework. And again, based on the BOPF object, you will have different implementation, which will be called at a runtime. So again, very difficult to identify which is getting in which sequence. But the general transaction handling that we have discussed should be getting executed. And that is the reason we are still performing this particular step. Okay, so there is nothing that I could be explaining or I should be explaining in this class. Maybe this is related to the buffers and it is taking care of. Maybe I'll just make a note of it somewhere so that you can, without any number for methods. A buffer is initialized. Now you can see all the classes related to delivery, whether item or maybe GUIDs, all those different things are being, class constructor is created. That means the object or the first trigger to those classes happening. So again, all the delivery related classes which we are going to use to read the data or for performing various activities, those are instantiated. And the class constructor is called, that means some reference of that class is being triggered. CL delivery item TO per PRD. So again, the item level class for the delivery item. You can see all the BOPF related components, even that was the implementation of a BOPF framework. Many. Let's see. Okay, what I will do is, I'm not sure whether this will be called a breakpoint. Third. Okay, so again in query method, there are two. So I'm sorry. So let's say, for example, this, if I take, okay, this is having only that. It is already set. Let's close it. Now, instead of doing next object set, I'll simply do an F8. Now you can see our delivery management query class is being called. So this is the class, and in between there are other classes also got called, but since we did not debug the completely, this is the class which will be called somewhere, and of this query method is called. And let me put a breakpoint at, or inside this, there is another. This would not be called now because we will not be updating anything, but this will also be called, which will trigger all your related activity. So I'll do an F8 now. So there are many more which got called, but I wanted to show you in the sequence what all is getting called. So if I go back to this table, you can see the cleanup has been called, which will initially, again, as I said, before starting the transaction or LUV, it will clean up all the buffers or so that it is not taking unnecessary data. Then you will see that you need to set the LG num. So it is already coming from the transaction, but this value should be set for that particular LUV. So that particular LUV will get executed for the specific warehouse number. Since we are reading the data, we need to do the query method. And in our case, the relevant one is this class. The query method of this class is getting called, which will give us the result. And if I would have debugged further, I would have seen the other, again, the cleanup and everything would have got triggered. We did not do the debugging completely, but we will see the next steps we will see. And again, since we are not doing any kind of save or update, the commit or rollback class is not, the methods are not triggered, but even that will be triggered. This is the sequence which SAP follows. So if you will see any transaction which I execute, you will see a general structure like this. SAP also follows a certain kind of structure to do any kind of transactional handling, whether it is read operation, any kind of modify, update, delete operation, they will follow a structure. So that transactional consistency is when you are implementing, let's say when you are writing a custom report to read the delivery number and make maybe just change the status of a delivery number. Then also you need to follow the transactional consistency. You cannot directly write because you know that table, PRDI table, and you read it on the table, or maybe just an update the data. Maybe for updation, you are using a function module. No, that will not be the correct approach. You need to follow all the steps. You do a cleanup, you set the LUV, LG num, then you use a query method to read the data. If you're updating something, you should use it in update task. Then you do the commit or rollback, and then you will further do the cleanup and everything. I'll come to the more scenario-based things on that. But let's take a break for 7 minutes here, and then we will come back and we will see the debugging again, and we will deep dive into the more aspect of these classes. So till now, what all methods or what all components of transaction handling that was called, let us see that. So the cleanup was called perfect. The second was setting of your warehouse, that was called perfect. Query was called, which was for reading the data. The only thing that we have not seen is how your commit, rollback, or maybe how your save is happening, because since we have not updated anything, let us see how or when that should be getting called. So in this delivery, what we have read, I'll again start the debugger and I will try to do a goods receipt posting. So now we had just read the delivery, nothing was changed, so probably the save would not have been triggered. So I follow the same step. I start the transaction /h or the debugger transaction, and then I do goods receipt posting. So I will click on this, same thing. I will enable, and this will trigger the update and everything. So maybe I'll try to debug this with all the iframes so that you can see. Okay, at least I could put breakpoints in this so that I know not delivery TR, delivery production. This gets called. I'm not sure of this, but yeah, let's check. We'll put a breakpoint and let's check. Okay, now this is not consistent. So still UI related things is happening. You have selected that particular report and performed goods receipt, and still it is checking the consistency of those things. And basically what you're seeing is all the class that was listed. So there are a lot of class that was listed in this diagram, and most of this are getting called from the BOP framework. Different classes would be getting called.
Yeah, hi sir. This is Dinesh from. Sorry, you can continue.
Okay. I don't want to skip because I don't know the exact objects which will be called. That's the reason I am doing this hard style of debugging. I think I should go directly. Too many objects will be there. Okay, I would be executing this. Maybe some of the things would be skipped, but let's see how at least those save should be triggered. It has come back to the delivery management class, what we were seeing. And in this delivery management class, you can see it is checking before save, whether it should be saved or it should be aborted. That condition will be passed for rollback or for commit work. So this is something I need to again note it down. It's delivery. Now maybe from here I can activate and let's see what is being called. Okay, so all the read, fetch, query, whatever methods are there to read and validate the data will be called. Again, it will be calling all these objects.
What sets ZaranTech apart in SAP corporate training? It's our unique blend of expertise and innovation. We offer customized courses tailored to each client's needs, ensuring relevant, targeted learning. Our vast trainer database brings you wisdom from the best in the field. Need resources? Access our extensive training material repository anytime. We are all about measurable results, providing detailed student metrics to track progress. And we don't just teach, we build community. Join our thriving social media network, connecting learners beyond boundaries. With ZaranTech, you are not just training, you are transforming your SAP expertise.
Now it will be calling all this object. I don't want to debug all these things. So I will put a break. I'll execute it. Probably commit explicitly will not be triggered because it would be some update function module will be triggered. And update task should be invoked here. Okay, I'll remove it from here because it is getting. You can see an update task, which is for the database update, has been invoked. So all my validation and everything is done. Then some update function module, which was scheduled, which has got triggered. So date task. So that means the commit work was triggered, or whatever. In case of rollback, also if you need to update the database, that has been triggered. And probably it will have all the information that you need to update. Yeah, so it has all the information, probably this table related information, what you need to update, that is there. And will there be more things? No, I don't think so. This is probably the last thing, and probably maybe again the cleanup might be called, but it's in a separate task, so I'm not sure if it will be called here. So I'll do and you can see the stock change notify. This will update to your ERP side also that, okay, something in the stock has changed. So this will ensure the complete transactional consistency with your ERP system side as well. Now, again, we reach our CL transaction manager class. The constructor of that is getting called. Let us see what all methods of this is getting called, subclasses. We see we have a breakpoint on TM class. Yeah, so now the final cleanup method is also called. So from the CL TM transaction manager class, the cleanup method is also called. This, I just wanted to show. That makes sense. Okay, so we come back to this notes, what we have implemented. We try to format this. Okay, so this is how the sequence what has been. The first, the cleanup was called, and this transaction cleanup called the transaction manager cleanup, which cleaned up all your buffers. If any inconsistent or unnecessary data was still there, that would have been cleaned up. Then your set LG num, where you are setting your warehouse number. Again, this will be called irrespective whether you're doing it for HU warehouse task, this will be called, because everything in EWM will be executed at warehouse level. So even the transaction buffers that will be updated will be updated for LG num. Which is the warehouse number. So this will be called, this will be basically setting up your warehouse for that particular LUV. Then since we were fetching the data, fetching the delivery number, so the corresponding delivery related execute query was called, and which called the delivery management production PRD based on the delivery document category, it would be called, and it gets the query method. So this is the query method, which would return us the delivery number, all the handling unit information if it is there, item information if it is there, all those information would be triggered. Then this method of the same delivery management class, check before save. So again, when you want to save something, you want to update something, then you need to call the corresponding save method instead of directly modifying the data. So this check before save method was triggered or called, that ensured whether this data should be saved or rollback. In our case, a rollback was not there because our data was consistent. If there would have been some problem, then the rollback would have happened. Then it triggered an update task, which was to update all the database tables, to the stock update, stock notification, and everything. So in the update task, probably it should be like this. So in the update task, the database table updates was happening, of course, and then the stock notification, any changes in the stock was triggered to the maybe ERP side or any kind of interface that needs to be triggered was done. And then again, finally, the buffers were cleaned up, and that completed the entire transaction. Even if you execute the for handling unit, you execute it for warehouse task, you will see a similar kind of sequence. Maybe this would change. Instead of DLV management, there would be some other class or some other function could be there, which you will read the data. I have not debugged the code which is updating the data. Like, I mean, for example, the delivery, which method is updating the data. Maybe some of the methods are related to this particular class would have been updating the data. I did not debug that. But apart from that, the structure of your transaction will be more or less like this. So when we talk about in EWM, not only in EWM, in any programming language, in fact, not only limited to ABAP, there would be three components. The first component will be UI. The second component will be buffers. The third component will be database table. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with me or not? So what happens is you send a request that, okay, I want to read this data. It will check for buffers. If it is there in the buffers, the relevant data is there in the buffer, but transactional data, we know we should not be updating the transactional data in the buffers. It makes sense to update the master data in buffers. That could be fine, but the transactional data in buffers could have adverse effects. So transitional data should not be in the buffer. Then if it is not there in the buffers, it will make a request to the database and, okay, I want to read this data. Then the data would be queried from the database and it would be sent back it would be loaded back to the buffer, and from buffer, it would come to UI. And then same way, your updates would be triggered. So when you are updating the things in the buffers. And once the transactional consistency is ensured, all the validation, all the pre-checks are confirmed, then the data from the buffers are updated into the final database table. And once the database table is updated, probably again, you need to clean up the buffers, you need to free up the memories, all those things. So even in all these steps that you have seen is basically revolving around these three areas. So from UI, you executed the transaction PRDI, and then all this were getting executed. It was being done in the application layer, was loading the data into buffer, processing the data from buffers. And then once you triggered the update task, then finally database table was updated. And then again, buffers were cleaned up. So that is how the transaction processing works. Now, let me discuss about some of the real-time scenarios or challenges that we generally encounter, or what could be the pitfalls if we are not following this kind of approach, if we are not ensuring the transactional consistency. Now, let me ask you this question. So I am doing this step. So the first step is, this is not the first step, but in the sequence of steps, I am first doing the cleanup buffers, and then I am doing the commit or rollback. Is it correct sequence of execution? And even in ABAP, you must be practicing all this transitional consistency. So even from ABAP perspective, tell me, is this the correct sequence?
First, it should be commit, then clean up.
Yes. What will happen if we first clean up the buffers and then we do a commit or rollback?
The things which are in buffer gets removed, right? So it will not commit properly. The inconsistency will happen. Yeah.
Right. So again, it happens. Let's say if you are writing a custom report and you have seen that even each and every class that you are using, there are methods for cleanup and there are methods for commit and everything. So if I go to this delivery class, you can see you will have methods for cleanup, and then you have method for save, which will trigger. So before saving, if you clean up the buffers, the data which you want to update in the database table is there in the buffers, and from buffers it should be updated into the database table. And that will result in inconsistent state, because all the data what should have been updated to the database table is not done. So that is one aspect. Should you call an explicit commit work? So instead of calling the save, so this is one aspect. This is done. There is a save method you have seen. I have updated. So I have updated the task and the values, and I directly trigger a commit work. What will happen in this case? Or put it other way around, how should I do a commit and rollback? Let's say you need to do the coding for commit and rollback. What condition you should evaluate, and then you should do either a commit or a rollback. Okay, so can I say like this? I do a check, pre-check, and if error, then I would roll back, else I would commit. And all this pre-checks is happening in the save method. So you should not be writing direct commits or direct rollbacks. You should try to see if there is any pre-check method or any save method that will take care of this. Now, let's say you have a rollback where you should put the error message. Now tell me, these are the line numbers. This is the line number 1. This is line number 2. This is line number 3. This is line number 4. This is line number 5. Tell me, where should I put my error message, or maybe application log if I'm trying to write, where I should write, which line number it should be.
Before 3.
Before
3.
That's correct. Because if I do not write the error message over here, the same problem what we had in case of commit. So error message should be written here. If I simply put this after rollback, the same problem what we had with commit, that the data has already been rolled back, probably we will not have the error message that we want to write on the application log. So again, this needs to be taken care of. And when you are making use of the standard methods, this would automatically be taken care of. You just need to call the correct method in the correct sequence. That then rest of the things will be taken care of. Another thing I have already mentioned, the commit should not be explicitly called. Any other pitfalls? Just give me a minute. Let me think on that. Okay. Now in the same one, now tell me where I should lock and unlock the entries. Where should be my lock and unlock entry? I will put one more here, which is, let's say 0, which is my query method, which will read the data to be modified, and this will read the data to be modified. Now in this same block, tell me where my lock and unlock should be happening.
Lock, we need to do it after the query method.
Okay. So you are saying I would do the lock here, 0.1.
Unlocking we can do at the end after if error statement, whether it is error or no error. Once the commit or rollback is completed, we can unlock that.
Okay, that is correct. Now, one more thing, I need to send an IDOC. So whatever the data we are updating, we are reading, I need to send an IDOC, maybe let's say to my customers or to my vendors, where that should be coming. I need to trigger an interface, maybe IDOC or anything, where that should be coming.
Before commit.
Yeah. So maybe I would say notification or external triggers, and that we have seen in our example as well. So this stock change notify, it was triggered in the update task, and it notified, then all the database tables were committed, and then the cleanup was happening. So basically, this would get triggered with the statement commit work or the rollback, and then it would happen in that sequence. But yes, what you mentioned is correct. So before committing the data into the database table, the notification should be happening, and then everything would be committed. And if you need to write success message also, then you will write a success message here as well. Now, how you are going to ensure that all these 3 steps are completed or everything is rolled back? This is fine. This is fine. Your commit and rollback, you are checking whether your data should be committed or rolled back. But how will you ensure this? What is the technical aspect that you do in ABAP so that you're ensuring that all steps A, B, C is done or nothing is done?
External triggering we can write in update function module.
Yes.
After that, we can just put a normal success message, and then commit will happen.
Right. So when I am mentioning commit here, I am talking about commit to database, not the commit statement. Commit will be happening somewhere here. So let us say I determine whether it will be rolled back or it will be commit. So here somewhere your commit statement will be triggered, and this commit statement will schedule, not trigger immediately, will schedule your update function module. And once the commit is encountered, your update function module will be triggered, and all these three ABC tasks will be in this update function module. So when you are considering from logical unit of work, all the tasks in this update function module will be as one LUV. So notification, email triggers, whatever is there will be one. It will be inside that LUV. Success message, let's say you need to write in the application log, or maybe whatever message you need to generate will be also there. And then updating, I should write update the database. Then it will update the database and everything. So if anything is failing, let's say for that trigger notification fail, you got a response as error, then this update function module itself will not get executed. So this failed, your success message will not be written, your database update will fail. So all those things will be done. And that is the way you will ensure the consistency of this LUV, the update LUV. Update task when you get executed, that will be ensured. So again, everything needs to be followed, needs to be taken care of, and even with more caution. Although in ABAP also we generally follow all these steps, it is important. But in EWM, because you would be dealing with huge volume of data, you can see there are multiple warehouse simultaneous user working on similar kind of data. When I say similar kind of data, probably let's say one is working on warehouse task number 1, W1, another warehouse worker is working on warehouse task number 2. If you are not doing proper locking or proper unlocking, then those transactions would not be handled. Let's say you moved one handling unit from goods received zone to, let's say, an intermediate area. And then from there, another warehouse worker will be picking that will be lifting that particular HU and will be putting it into another storage bin. So when you perform this activity of moving it from goods received zone to intermediate zone, and if you did not release the lock, then the next warehouse worker who is coming to pick that HU and put it into storage bin will not be able to perform the task. So there are again simultaneous activities happening, related activities happening. It becomes very important that you handle the transaction very carefully. Again, what steps we have implemented, this should be followed when you are writing any custom report, when you are writing any custom thing. And I have not shown you any direct select query. Everywhere, even if you will look at the slides, all the slides for each components, they have given you a list of function modules or classes, whatever is there. Not only this, if I go to other ones also, like for warehouse logistics, you will see a lot of classes. You will see you know the table names where data will be updated, but never directly the select query on those tables. Just look for the function modules and everything is there, and you will be able to use it. Yeah. Here also, here in inbound delivery, outbound delivery, they must have given the query class. Delivery management, it is the same class which will be which we have seen. That these are the classes we have seen. Similarly, for inventory management, there should be classes. Okay. Here the classes are not mentioned, but that we will be covering when we are discussing about all the function modules methods available in EWM. So there are already pre-delivered objects, query objects, function modules, methods that we should be using. Never ever write any kind of database operation directly on the database table. Maybe for some tables you can write. I'm not saying that is a rule. Like some of the tables where you are, let's say, for reading the configuration data, maybe you could not find a function module or a method for that. But on the transactional table, never ever write any database operations on those. Okay. And then this is the approach you can follow if you want to find the set of objects. For example, if you want to do some kind of an enhancement, then again, this is the approach we generally follow. We also put a layer debugging. We debug, we see what are the components that are getting called. And of course, I'll also give you the list of classes and methods. You can put breakpoint to filter the debugging to some extent. And then you can find what are the components, what is the data which is being passed, and then you can use in your custom objects.